The signal wasn't supposed to exist. From the edge of a black hole, across broken time and shattered space, came a whisper of life. 50,000 voices trapped aboard a lost colony ship screaming into the void. The Galactic Harmony Council heard the call. They tried and failed. Ships crushed, crews lost, equations collapsed. The eternal dawn was declared a tragedy. A memorial, not a mission. But one species refused to accept that. The humans. The Deathworlders. The ones the galaxy kept at arm's length, too violent, too reckless, too human. And yet, when the storm howled, when gravity tore through space and hope faded, it wasn't peacekeepers who stepped forward. It was the monsters. With scarred ships, stubborn hearts, and minds forged in the fires of impossible worlds. This is the story of how the galaxy learned that sometimes, only Deathworlders can pull the helpless from the edge of oblivion. The impossible signal. The emergency beacon cut through hyperspace like a scream in the dark. Across 17 solar systems, every receiver capable of detecting quantum frequencies picked up the same desperate message. The signal was weak, fractured, but unmistakably real. Someone was calling for help from a place no living being should be able to survive. High Counselor Viridian stood in the crystal chamber of the Galactic Harmony Council, his silver skin reflecting the soft blue light that illuminated the ancient hall. Around him, representatives from 43 different species sat in perfect circles, their forms as varied as the stars themselves. The Zephyrians floated in their containment bubbles, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form millennia ago. The towering Karathi delegates swayed gently on their root-like appendages, their leaf-crowned heads turning toward the central display. Even the microscopic Nexari were present, their collective consciousness manifesting as a shimmering cloud above their designated platform. All of them stared in horror at the holographic display showing the source of the distress signal. "The readings are confirmed," announced Dr. Ythara, the Council's chief scientist. Her tentacled form rippled with distress colors as she manipulated the display controls. The signal originates from coordinates 847 Alpha 9, approximately 12,000 light-years from the galactic rim. A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. Those coordinates placed the signal's origin at the edge of the Maelstrom sector, where space itself was torn apart by gravitational anomalies and quantum storms. It was a region marked on every star chart with a single, universally understood symbol: certain death. "That's impossible," whispered Ambassador Delian, his crystalline form chiming with disbelief. The Silicoids people had mapped the galaxy for over 1,000,000 years, and they knew better than anyone that nothing could survive in the Maelstrom. No ship, no matter how advanced, could function in those conditions. High Counselor Viridian raised one of his 4 arms for silence. His species, the ethereal Altians, were among the oldest members of the Council, and their word carried the weight of eons. "Play the message again, Dr. Ythara. Let us hear what our unknown friends are trying to tell us." The chamber fell silent as the transmission crackled to life. Static filled the air, punctuated by fragments of desperate voices speaking in multiple languages. The Council's universal translators struggled to process the broken communication, but slowly, words began to emerge from the chaos. "Anyone who can hear this. Colony ship Eternal Dawn, trapped in gravitational anomaly, 50,000 souls aboard, life support failing. Please, if anyone can hear us." The message dissolved back into static, but the impact was immediate. 50,000 people were dying in a place where rescue should be impossible. The council chamber erupted in urgent conversations as delegates tried to process the implications. 50,000, breathed Ambassador Kess, her feathered form trembling with emotion. The avian skyborn were known for their deep empathy, and the thought of so many suffering beings struck her to the core. How could so many be trapped in the maelstrom? Dr. Ythara manipulated her controls, bringing up historical data. Records show that the colony ship Eternal Dawn departed from New Geneva 3 years ago, bound for the Outer Rim territories. They were carrying colonists from 17 different species, all seeking to establish a new world far from the crowded core systems. New Geneva, muttered Councillor Brantex, his rocky exterior shifting with what might have been concern. The Stoneheart people were not given to emotion, but even they recognized the tragedy unfolding. That's a human colony world, is it not? The question hung in the air like a cloud of toxic gas. Several delegates shifted uncomfortably, their various forms expressing unease in species-specific ways. The humans had been members of the Galactic Harmony Council for only 50 years, and their membership was still considered probationary by many. They were too young, too violent, too unpredictable for the tastes of the older, more civilized species. The Eternal Dawn was indeed launched from human space, Dr. Wythara confirmed, her colors shifting to nervous patterns. However, the passenger manifest shows representatives from many council species. This is not purely a human matter. High Counselor Viridian stood, his ancient form commanding attention through sheer presence. The origin of the ship is irrelevant. 50,000 beings are in mortal danger, and it is our duty as members of the Galactic Harmony Council to attempt their rescue. Dr. Ythara, what would such a mission require? The scientist's tentacles writhed with distress. High Counselor, I must be frank. The Maelstrom sector experiences gravitational forces exceeding 10,000 standard units. The quantum storms in that region can tear apart matter at the subatomic level. The radiation alone would kill most known life forms in minutes. Most known life forms, Ambassador Delian noted, his crystalline voice chiming with hidden meaning. But what about those that might survive such conditions? The chamber fell silent again, but this time the silence carried a different weight. Every delegate knew what Delian was implying, but none wanted to speak it aloud. Finally, Ambassador Kess broke the uncomfortable quiet. The humans, she said simply. You're thinking of the humans. The reaction was immediate. Several delegates began speaking at once, their voices creating a cacophony of concern and objection. The Zephyrians pulsed with agitated energy. The Karathi's leaves rustled with what could only be distress. Even the normally calm Nexari cloud flickered with rapid patterns of disturbance. The humans are barely civilized, protested Counselor Brantex. They've been spacefaring for less than 3 centuries. Their ships are primitive, their technology crude. They are violent by nature, added another delegate, a slug-like being whose name translated roughly to peaceful contemplator. Their entire history is one of warfare and destruction. How can we trust them with such a delicate mission? Because, interrupted a new voice from the chamber's entrance, sometimes you need monsters to go where angels fear to tread. Every head, tentacle, and optical sensor in the chamber turned toward the speaker. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the doorway, her human form looking impossibly small among the assembled galactic representatives. She wore the simple gray uniform of the Human Defense Force, decorated only with the modest insignia of her rank, and the silver pin that marked her as an official council observer. Chen was not a large woman by human standards, standing barely 5.5 feet tall with the lean build of someone who had spent years in the variable gravity of different worlds. Her black hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her dark eyes held the kind of steady gaze that came from looking death in the face more times than anyone should. At 45, she had already served in conflicts across 3 sectors and had the quiet confidence of someone who had learned to make impossible decisions under pressure. High Counselor Viridian regarded the human with something approaching curiosity. Commander Chen, I was not aware you had been invited to this emergency session. I wasn't invited, Chen replied calmly, walking further into the chamber without showing any sign of intimidation. But when I heard the distress call, I knew you'd eventually get around to discussing the obvious solution. I thought I'd save everyone some time. The obvious solution? Ambassador Delian's crystalline form chimed with what might have been amusement. And what would that be, human? Chen stopped in the center of the chamber, surrounded by beings whose civilizations were older than her entire species. You send humans to get those people out of the maelstrom. The response was predictable. Voices rose in protest and disbelief. Several delegates stood, their various forms expressing outrage in ways that would have been comical if the situation weren't so desperate. Impossible, declared Counselor Brantex. Human ships cannot survive those conditions any better than ours can. Your technology is insufficient, added Dr. Ythara, her colors flashing with scientific certainty. The gravitational stresses would tear apart your vessels. Chen waited for the voices to die down before responding. When she spoke, her voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had learned to lead by example rather than volume. You're right, she said simply. Our ships aren't tougher than yours. Our technology isn't more advanced, but there's one thing you're forgetting. And what is that? Asked High Counselor Viridian. Chen looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of every delegate she could. We're used to living in places that want to kill us, every single day. The chamber fell silent once more, but this time the silence carried the weight of truth. Every species present had evolved on worlds that were, by galactic standards, paradises: gentle gravity, perfect atmospheres, stable climates, and abundant resources. They had developed technology to make their lives even more comfortable and safe. Humans were different. Earth was a death world by any reasonable standard, a planet of extremes where survival required constant adaptation and stubborn persistence. The gravity was crushing to most species, the atmosphere was corrosive, the weather was violent and unpredictable, the biology was aggressive and competitive. On my world, Chen continued, her voice growing stronger, we have storms that can level cities, we have deserts where the air itself can kill you. We have oceans filled with creatures that hunt things larger than your ships. We have volcanoes that can change the climate of entire continents. She paused, letting that sink in. And we call it home. Ambassador Kess leaned forward, her feathered form rustling with interest. What are you proposing, Commander? I'm proposing that you let the Deathworlders handle this one, Chen replied. Give us 3 ships, the best radiation shielding you can manufacture, and whatever scientific support you can provide. We'll go into the maelstrom and bring those people home. 3 ships against forces that destroyed our most advanced rescue vessels? Dr. Yithara's colors shifted to patterns of incredulity. Commander, I respect your courage, but this is not about bravery. The physics involved are simply too extreme. Chen smiled, an expression that somehow managed to be both reassuring and slightly predatory. Doctor, with respect, you've never seen what humans can do when the physics get extreme. We don't just adapt to impossible conditions, we thrive in them. High Counselor Viridian studied the human commander for a long moment. His species had lived for over 10 million years, had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations, had witnessed wonders and horrors beyond imagination. Yet something about this small human female intrigued him. Assuming we were to approve such a mission, he said carefully, what would you require from the Council? Chen's smile widened. 3 volunteer crews, 50 humans total, modified ships with the best gravity dampeners and radiation shields you can build, and about 72 hours to get to the maelstrom before those people's life support fails completely. Volunteer crews? Ambassador Delian chimed with surprise. You would ask your people to volunteer for what is essentially a suicide mission? I won't have to ask, Chen replied with absolute confidence. When word gets out that there are 50,000 people trapped out there, I'll have more volunteers than I can use. That's what humans do. We help people, even when it's impossible. The chamber fell silent for a third time. This silence was different from the others. It was the silence of beings who were suddenly seeing humanity in a new light. Not as violent barbarians to be tolerated, but as something else entirely, something useful. High Counselor Viridian stood, his ancient form seeming to gather authority around itself like a cloak. The Council will vote, all those in favor of authorizing Commander Chen's proposed rescue mission. One by one, appendages, tentacles, and energy patterns rose in agreement. The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 41 species voted in favor, with only 2 abstentions. The motion carries, Viridian announced. Commander Chen, you have your authorization. May the stars guide you safely home. Chen nodded once, sharply, then turned toward the chamber's exit. As she reached the doorway, she paused and looked back at the assembled delegates. Oh, and counselors? When we bring them home, I hope you'll remember that sometimes the galaxy needs its monsters. Then she was gone, leaving behind a chamber full of the galaxy's most advanced beings, to contemplate the uncomfortable truth that their civilization might depend on the very qualities they had tried so hard to leave behind. In the depths of space, the distress signal continued to pulse, carrying its desperate message across the void. 50,000 souls waited in the darkness, unaware that help was coming in the form of creatures who had learned to fight the impossible and win. The Deathworlders were going to war against the universe itself. And for the first time in galactic history, the universe might just lose. Into the maelstrom. The human staging area at Kepler Station had transformed into organized chaos within 6 hours of the Council's authorization. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck, watching as 3 massive vessels underwent rapid modifications that would have taken most species months to complete. The humans were working with a desperate efficiency that both impressed and terrified their alien observers. The ships themselves were impressive examples of human engineering philosophy. Where other species built vessels like works of art, sleek and elegant, humans built them like weapons. The lead ship, renamed Defiant for the mission, was a converted deep space mining vessel. Its hull was scarred and reinforced from years of working in asteroid fields where a single mistake could mean death. The second ship, Persistence, had been a military transport designed to carry troops through hostile territory. The third, Unbreakable, was a rescue vessel that had spent its career pulling survivors from disasters across human space. They looked like exactly what they were, ships built by survivors for survivors. Dr. Yathara floated beside Chen, her tentacles writhing with nervous energy as she watched human technicians install Galactic Council technology with casual disregard for safety protocols. Commander, your people are installing quantum field generators without proper isolation chambers. One mistake could create a cascade failure that would destroy the entire station. Chen glanced at the alien scientist with a slight smile. Doctor, my people have been making mistakes with dangerous technology for centuries. We've gotten pretty good at surviving them. Below them, Chief Engineer Martinez emerged from the Defiance engine compartment, his uniform stained with coolant fluid and his face bearing the satisfied expression of someone who had just done something impossible. He looked up at the observation deck and gave Chen a thumbs up. That's the signal, Chen said, turning from the window. We're ready to launch. Dr. Withara's colors shifted to patterns of disbelief. Ready? Commander, you've been working for less than 7 hours. Our estimates suggested that proper modifications would take at least 3 weeks. Doctor, when humans are motivated, we don't do proper modifications. We do whatever works. Chen started walking toward the docking bay. Besides, we don't have 3 weeks. Those people have maybe 60 hours of life support left, and we need 40 hours just to reach the maelstrom. The alien scientist followed, her tentacles creating complex patterns that the universal translator interpreted as profound concern. But the risks, Commander, the quantum storms alone could tear apart your ships at the molecular level. Chen stopped walking and turned to face Dr. Yithara directly. Doctor, let me explain something about humans. We've been diving into certain depths since before we had space travel. We've explored ocean depths that would crush your ships like paper cups. We've climbed mountains where the air is too thin to breathe. We've walked into burning buildings to save people we've never met. She paused, her dark eyes reflecting absolute certainty. This is just another day at the office. The docking bay was a symphony of controlled chaos. 150 human volunteers had arrived at Kepler Station within hours of Chen's call for help. She had chosen 50 of the best, leaving 100 disappointed volunteers behind. The chosen crew members moved with the practiced efficiency of people who had learned that hesitation kills. Captain Rebecca Torres commanded Persistence. She was a veteran of the Proxima Colony disaster, where she had evacuated 30,000 civilians from a dying world while under enemy fire. Her crew consisted entirely of combat veterans who had learned to function under impossible pressure. Captain James Wright led the crew of Unbreakable. His ship specialized in rescue operations in hazardous environments. Wright himself had once spent 18 hours in a suit with failing life support, pulling survivors from a collapsed mining station. His people were experts at keeping others alive when the universe was trying to kill them. Chen's own ship, Defiant, carried the mission's most dangerous cargo, the quantum resonance equipment needed to locate and extract the eternal dawn from whatever impossible physics had trapped it. Her crew was a mix of engineers, physicists, and what humans euphemistically called problem solvers. Ambassador Kess arrived just as the final loading operations were completing. The avian diplomat's feathers rustled with barely controlled emotion as she approached Chen. Commander, I wanted to speak with you before you departed. The passengers aboard the Eternal Dawn. Many of them are from my world, young families who sought a new life among the stars. Her voice carried the weight of personal stakes. Please, bring them home. Chen placed a reassuring hand on the alien's wing. Ambassador, I give you my word. We'll bring them home or die trying. That's what I'm afraid of, Kess whispered. The launch sequence began with the kind of precision that only came from extensive practice with life or death scenarios. Chen strapped herself into the captain's chair of the Defiant, feeling the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. Around her, the bridge crew ran through final system checks with the calm efficiency of professionals who had learned not to waste time on fear. Navigation, report, Chen ordered. Lieutenant Commander Park, a slight woman whose calm demeanor hid nerves of steel, looked up from her console. Course plotted for the Maelstrom sector. Jump calculations complete. Estimated travel time, 39 hours, 14 minutes. Engineering? Chief Martinez's voice crackled over the comm system. All systems green, Captain. The new quantum field generators are running hot, but they're stable. Radiation shielding is at maximum capacity. Communications? All ships report ready for departure, announced Ensign Davis. We're receiving final telemetry data from Dr. Yuthara's team. Chen activated the ship-wide communication system. This is the captain. In a few minutes, we're going to jump into hell itself. The Maelstrom sector has killed everything that's ever entered it, and we're about to find out if humans are too stubborn to die. She paused, looking around at her crew. 50,000 people are counting on us. Families, children, scientists, and explorers from across the galaxy. They're trapped in a place where the laws of physics break down, and we're the only ones crazy enough to go get them. Through the view screen, Chen could see the other ships in formation. She knew similar speeches were being given on Persistence and Unbreakable. Human crews preparing for another impossible mission. Remember your training, trust your equipment, and watch each other's backs. We're going to bring those people home. Chen nodded to Lieutenant Commander Park. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump. Space folded around the three human vessels like a crushing fist. The sensation of hyperspace travel was never pleasant, but this jump felt different. Even through the ship's inertial dampeners, Chen could feel reality stretching and compressing around them. The Maelstrom's gravitational influence was so powerful that it was affecting hyperspace itself. When they emerged from the jump, the universe had become a nightmare. The Maelstrom sector looked like someone had taken a normal region of space and fed it through a cosmic blender. Stars twisted into impossible spirals, their light bent and distorted by gravitational forces that violated every known law of physics. Nebulae moved in patterns that hurt to watch, their gases flowing in directions that existed in more than 3 dimensions. At the center of it all, a massive black hole spun like an angry god, its event horizon flickering with energy discharges that lit up the surrounding chaos. Holy Mother of... Chief Martinez's voice cut off as he struggled to process what he was seeing. Radiation levels are off the scale, reported Dr. Kim, the mission's chief physicist. The quantum storms are generating particle streams that shouldn't be possible. Our shielding is holding, but barely. Chen studied the tactical display, trying to make sense of readings that challenged everything she knew about space navigation. Locate the Eternal Dawn. Their signal should be somewhere in this mess. It took 15 minutes of intensive scanning before they found it. The colony ship was trapped in what the sensors could only describe as a gravitational eddy, a region where space-time itself had been twisted into a knot. The massive vessel was spinning slowly, held in place by forces that alternately crushed and stretched its hull. There, Lieutenant Commander Park said, pointing to a flickering icon on the display. But Captain, the gravitational forces around that ship, our navigational computers can't plot a safe course. The physics are too unstable. Chen stared at the display for a long moment, then smiled with the kind of expression that had made human commanders famous across the galaxy. Then we don't use the computers, we navigate by instinct. The approach to the Eternal Dawn took 4 hours of the most dangerous flying any of the crew had ever experienced. The human ships moved through the gravitational maze like dancers, their pilots making split-second adjustments based on nothing more than intuition and experience. Where alien crews would have relied on computer calculations and safety protocols, the humans simply adapted to conditions that changed from second to second. Captain Torres in Persistence nearly lost her ship when a gravity wave caught her starboard engine. Her response was to shut down the damaged system and continue flying on partial power, compensating for the imbalance through pure skill. Captain Wright in Unbreakable discovered that his ship's hull was being stretched by tidal forces that should have torn it apart. His solution was to use the ship's artificial gravity generators to create a counter-effect, essentially flying his vessel while it was being pulled in 6 directions at once. Chen's own ship suffered a cascade failure in the primary navigation system. Her response was to switch to manual control and navigate using nothing but visual references and instinct, treating the Maelstrom like a 3-dimensional asteroid field. When they finally reached the Eternal Dawn, the sight that greeted them was both heartbreaking and inspiring. The massive colony ship was damaged but intact, its hull scarred by the impossible forces that held it captive. Through its viewports, they could see lights flickering, signs that people were still alive inside. Hailing frequencies open, Ensign Davis reported. Eternal Dawn, this is Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Force. We're here to get you out. The response came immediately, a voice crackling with static and overwhelming relief. Commander Chen, thank the stars. This is Captain Elizabeth Vega. We have 53,000 souls aboard, including 8,000 children. Our life support is failing and our engines are completely offline. Chen felt the familiar weight of absolute responsibility settle on her shoulders. 53,000 lives, including thousands of children from species she had never met, trapped in a place where rescue should be impossible. Captain Vega, we're going to get you out of there, but I need you to listen carefully. We're going to have to do this the hard way. Over the next hour, Chen explained the rescue plan. It was insane, dangerous, and violated about a dozen safety protocols that had kept galactic civilizations safe for millennia. It was also the only plan that had any chance of working. The human ships would use their quantum field generators to create a temporary bubble of stable space-time around the eternal dawn. This would allow the colony ship's engines to restart long enough for it to break free from the gravitational trap. The process would drain the human ship's power reserves and leave them vulnerable to the maelstrom's effects. Commander, Captain Vega's voice carried obvious concern. If you create that bubble, your ships won't have enough power to escape the maelstrom yourselves. Chen looked around at her bridge crew, seeing the same determined expression on every face. These were people who had volunteered for a suicide mission, and they all knew it. Captain, that's a problem for later. Right now, let's focus on getting your people to safety. The quantum bubble formation began 30 minutes later. The three human ships positioned themselves around the eternal dawn in a perfect triangle, their quantum field generators synchronized to create a pocket of normal physics in the heart of chaos. The energy drain was enormous, and systems began failing across all three vessels as they poured everything they had into the rescue attempt. Field generators at maximum output, Chief Martinez reported, his voice strained. Hull stress is approaching critical levels. Persistence reporting multiple system failures, came Captain Torres's voice over the comm, but the field is holding. Unbreakable here, Captain Wright added. We're losing life support on decks 7 through 12, but we're still in the fight. Inside the quantum bubble, the Eternal Dawn's engines came back to life. The massive colony ship began to move, slowly at first, then with increasing speed as it broke free from the gravitational forces that had held it captive. This is Vega, the colony ship captain reported. We're free, engines at full power, heading for open space. Chen watched the tactical display as the Eternal Dawn accelerated away from the maelstrom, carrying 53,000 lives to safety. The mission was a success, but the cost was becoming apparent. All three human ships were crippled, their power reserves exhausted, their systems failing one by one. Commander, Lieutenant Commander Park said quietly, our engines are offline. Life support is failing. We're trapped in the same gravitational field that held the Eternal Dawn. Chen nodded, feeling strangely calm. They had saved 53,000 lives. If that cost them their own, it was a trade any human would make. All ships, this is Chen. Mission accomplished. We got them out. The response from her fellow captains was immediate and unanimous. Not one voice expressed regret or fear, only satisfaction at a job well done. As the human ships drifted deeper into the maelstrom, their hulls beginning to crack under impossible stresses, Chen thought about the species they had just saved. Peaceful beings from gentle worlds who would now live to see their new colony, to raise their children under alien stars, to contribute to the grand tapestry of galactic civilization. It was, she decided, a good day to die. Then her communications officer looked up with an expression of stunned disbelief. Captain, I'm receiving a transmission. Multiple ships approaching our position. On the main view screen, a fleet of vessels appeared through the gravitational distortions. Ships from dozens of different species flying in formation despite the impossible conditions of the maelstrom. Leading them was Dr. Ythara's research vessel, its hull glowing with experimental shielding that should have been impossible to create in such a short time. This is Dr. Ythara to the human rescue fleet, came the alien scientist's voice. Commander Chen, did you really think we would let you die alone out here? Chen stared at the screen in amazement as ship after ship appeared. Zephyrian energy beings in crystalline vessels, Karathi ships that looked like flying trees. Even the microscopic Nexari had sent a ship, their collective consciousness piloting a vessel no larger than a shuttle. Doctor, how did you get here so fast? And how are your ships surviving the maelstrom? We had some help, Dr. Ythara replied. It seems that watching humans work has given us some new ideas about what's possible. The rescue took another 6 hours, with alien crews working alongside humans to repair the damaged ships and create a stable exit route from the maelstrom. It was the largest cooperative effort in galactic history, with dozens of species working together to save the people who had saved them. When the combined fleet finally emerged from the gravitational nightmare, they were met by a sight that would be remembered for millennia. Every ship in the sector had come to witness the return of the heroes who had done the impossible. Commander Sarah Chen stood on her bridge, looking out at a galaxy that would never look at humanity the same way again. They were no longer probationary members of galactic civilization. They were the people you called when the impossible needed to be done. The Deathworlders had come home, and they had brought everyone else with them. When worlds collide. 6 months after the Maelstrom rescue, Commander Sarah Chen stood in the same crystal chamber where she had first volunteered for what everyone believed was a suicide mission. This time, however, the atmosphere was completely different. Where once there had been reluctant tolerance for humanity's presence, now there was something that looked suspiciously like respect. High Counselor Viridian rose from his seat, his ancient form seeming to glow with an inner light that Chen had never noticed before. Around him, representatives from 43 species watched with expressions of anticipation that transcended their vastly different biologies. "Commander Chen," Viridian began, his voice carrying across the chamber with ceremonial weight. "6 months ago, you stood in this very chamber and volunteered for a mission that every expert in the galaxy declared impossible. You asked us to trust in human capabilities that we did not understand. Today, we gather to acknowledge what that trust has accomplished." Chen remained standing at attention, though she could feel the weight of thousands of eyes, sensors, and other observational organs focused on her. Beside her stood Captains Torres and Wright, along with the other crew members who had survived the mission. Not all of them had made it home. Chief Martinez had died when the Defiance engine core had overloaded during the rescue. Dr. Kim had suffered radiation poisoning that would affect her for the rest of her life. 17 other humans had paid various prices for their success, but 53,000 beings from across the galaxy were alive because of their sacrifice. "The rescue of the Eternal Dawn has changed more than just the fate of those trapped souls," Viridian continued. "It has fundamentally altered how this council views the nature of impossible problems and the species capable of solving them." Dr. Yithara floated forward, her tentacles creating patterns that the Universal Translator interpreted as profound emotion. "Commander, before the Maelstrom mission, I believed that certain physical laws were absolute barriers. The gravitational forces in that region should have made rescue impossible by any known means." She paused, her colors shifting to patterns of scientific wonder. "You and your people have taught us that impossible is simply another word for hasn't been tried by humans yet." A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the assembled delegates. Chen found herself smiling despite the solemnity of the occasion. The galaxy's sense of humor was evolving, and humans were apparently a significant influence. Ambassador Kess stepped forward, her feathered form rustling with emotion. "Commander Chen? Among the passengers rescued from the Eternal Dawn were 347 members of my species, including my own daughter and her children." The avian diplomat's voice broke slightly. "There are no words in any language to express what your people's sacrifice means to us." Similar testimonials came from representatives of every species that had lost citizens aboard the colony ship. The crystalline silicoids spoke of rescued artists whose works would now inspire future generations. The root-like Karathi testified about saved scientists whose research would benefit the entire galaxy. Even the energy beings known as Zephyrians acknowledged the debt they owed to human courage. But it was the next speaker who truly surprised Chen. Counselor Brantex, the rocky representative of the Stoneheart people who had been among humanity's harshest critics, stepped forward with movements that seemed less rigid than usual. "Commander Chen," he said, his voice carrying undertones that suggested deep internal conflict, "my people have always believed that civilization required the abandonment of primitive qualities like aggression and risk-taking. We viewed humanity's retention of these traits as evidence of your species' inferior development." He paused, his rocky exterior shifting in what might have been embarrassment. "We were wrong." The chamber fell silent. In 10,000 years of Galactic Council history, the Stonehearts had never publicly admitted error. The qualities we dismissed as barbaric proved to be exactly what the galaxy needed when faced with true crisis. Your willingness to risk everything, your adaptation to impossible conditions, your refusal to accept defeat. Brantex's voice grew stronger. "These are not signs of primitive development. They are the marks of a species that refuses to let others suffer when action is possible." High Counselor Viridian nodded approvingly. "Which brings us to why we have gathered today. The success of the Maelstrom rescue has demonstrated that the galaxy faces challenges that require specialized approaches. The Council has voted to establish a new organization within our government structure." Chen felt a familiar sensation in her stomach. It was the same feeling she had experienced just before every dangerous mission of her career, the moment when she realized that her life was about to become significantly more complicated. "The Impossible Situations Response Division," Viridian announced, "a permanent force tasked with handling crises that exceed the capabilities of conventional galactic civilization. Commander Chen, the Council unanimously requests that you accept leadership of this new organization." The weight of the offer hit Chen like a physical blow. They were asking her to institutionalize humanity's role as the galaxy's problem solvers, to turn her people into the official last resort for impossible situations. "Hi, Counselor," she said carefully. "What exactly would this organization do?" Dr. Yithara answered, her tentacles creating excited patterns. "Commander, there are dozens of ongoing situations across the galaxy that we have simply accepted as unsolvable. Colonies trapped on worlds with impossible weather, research stations cut off by spatial anomalies, entire species facing extinction from environmental disasters that exceed our technological capabilities to address. Problems that require the human approach," added Ambassador Delian, his crystalline form chiming with what sounded like anticipation. "Situations where conventional wisdom says impossible, but human wisdom says, 'Hold my beer.'" Chen blinked in surprise. "Did you just use human slang, Ambassador?" "We have been studying human culture extensively since the Maelstrom rescue," Delian admitted. "Your linguistic patterns are educational, particularly your tendency to treat impossible challenges as personal insults." Another ripple of amusement passed through the chamber. Chen was beginning to realize that humanity's influence on galactic culture was spreading far beyond their rescue capabilities. "Commander," High Counselor Viridian said, bringing the discussion back to its serious core, "this is not a request we make lightly. What we are asking would place enormous responsibility on your species. You would become the galaxy's first response to disasters that conventional forces cannot handle." Chen thought about the implications. Permanent deployment to the most dangerous places in the galaxy, constant exposure to situations where failure meant death for thousands or millions of beings, the kind of work that would cost human lives on a regular basis. It sounded like exactly the kind of job humans were born for. "I accept," she said simply. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of sounds that somehow managed to harmonize into something resembling applause. Chen had just committed her species to becoming the galaxy's professional heroes, and everyone present seemed to think it was exactly the right decision. Over the following weeks, Chen learned just how many impossible situations the galaxy had been quietly ignoring. The Meridian colony, trapped on a world where the very atmosphere was toxic to their species, but where they had discovered scientific breakthroughs that could benefit everyone. The research station orbiting a neutron star, cut off by magnetic storms that scrambled all conventional technology. 3 separate species facing extinction from natural disasters that their gentle evolutionary backgrounds had left them completely unprepared to handle. The list seemed endless. The first official mission of the Impossible Situations Response Division took them to the Outer Rim, where the gentle folk of Pacifica Prime were facing extinction from volcanic activity that their peaceful nature made them incapable of addressing. These beings had never experienced violence of any kind in their million-year history. To them, the very concept of fighting against nature was incomprehensible. To humans, it was Tuesday. Captain Torres led a team that established evacuation routes through lava fields that would have been instantly fatal to most species. Captain Wright coordinated the construction of emergency shelters in conditions that violated every safety protocol the galaxy had ever established. Chen herself supervised the installation of a planetary defense grid designed to deflect volcanic debris, working in temperatures and toxic gas concentrations that should have killed her entire team. They saved 47 million gentlefolk, relocating them to a safer world while teams of human engineers worked to make their original planet habitable again. The rescue was front-page news across the galaxy, but what surprised Chen was the reaction from the gentlefolk themselves. Instead of the grateful but distant appreciation she had expected, they welcomed the humans as family. These beings who had never known violence embraced the warriors who had saved them with a love that transcended species barriers. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as the Impossible Situations Response Division tackled one unsolvable problem after another. The pattern was always the same. Human crews would venture into conditions that should have killed them, accomplish tasks that violated known science, and emerge with solutions that no one else had been able to imagine. But what Chen found most remarkable was how the galaxy changed in response to humanity's example. Species that had never known conflict began developing technologies inspired by human military engineering. Peaceful civilizations started training their citizens in emergency response techniques based on human survival methods. The galaxy's approach to problem-solving itself began to shift, becoming more aggressive, more willing to take risks, more determined to fight against impossible odds. Dr. Yithara called it constructive contamination. Humanity's willingness to embrace danger and uncertainty was spreading through galactic civilization like a beneficial virus, making everyone stronger and more capable. The transformation was most visible in the young. Children from dozens of species began playing games inspired by human heroics. Schools started teaching courses in applied impossibility based on human problem-solving methods. An entire generation was growing up with the understanding that impossible was just another challenge to overcome. Chen stood in her office aboard the Defiant, looking out at a view that would have been unimaginable a year ago. 36 ships from 20 different species floated in formation around her vessel, all of them staffed by volunteers who had requested assignment to the Impossible Situations Response Division. They were alien crews who had learned to think like humans, to embrace danger in service of a greater cause. Captain Torres entered without knocking, a privilege that came with shared survival in impossible conditions. Sarah, we've got another one. The Harmony Scientific Collective has lost contact with their deep space research station. It's caught in some kind of temporal anomaly. Chen smiled, feeling the familiar thrill of an impossible challenge. Time distortion? That's a new one. How long do they think the crew can survive? That's the problem, Torres replied with a grin that matched Chen's own. According to the readings, they've been trapped for 6 months, but from their perspective, only 6 minutes have passed. The physics don't make sense. Then it sounds like a job for people who don't make sense either, Chen said, reaching for her jacket. How many volunteers do we have? All of them. Every ship in the division wants in on this one. Chen laughed, a sound that had become famous across the galaxy as the herald of impossible rescues. Of course they do. What's the point of being the galaxy's designated impossible problem solvers if you're going to turn down a challenge because it involves temporal paradoxes? As she walked toward the bridge, Chen reflected on how much had changed since that first desperate plea from the maelstrom. Humanity had gone from probationary members of galactic civilization to its most essential component. They were no longer the violent barbarians to be tolerated, but the heroes to be celebrated. More importantly, they had taught the entire galaxy that impossible was just another word for not yet attempted with sufficient determination. The bridge crew looked up as she entered, their faces showing the same expression of eager anticipation that had become humanity's trademark. These were people who had learned to find joy in the face of certain death, who treated physics-defying challenges as entertainment. All right, people, Chen announced, settling into her captain's chair. We've got a research station trapped in a temporal anomaly that doesn't obey the laws of physics. Any suggestions? Chief Engineer Rodriguez looked up from his console with a grin that would have terrified most species. Captain, I've got an idea that's either brilliant or completely insane. Those are my favorite kind, Chen replied. Let's go save some scientists from time itself. As the human fleet prepared for another impossible mission, word of their latest challenge spread across the galaxy. On thousands of worlds, beings looked up at the stars and felt a sense of security that had never existed before. Somewhere out there, the Deathworlders were on duty. No problem was too impossible. No challenge was too dangerous. No one would be left behind. The galaxy had learned to sleep peacefully, knowing that when the impossible happened, humanity would answer the call. They always did, and they always would. The universe itself had learned to fear the species that treated impossibility as a personal challenge. Somewhere in the darkness between the stars, problems that had once seemed insurmountable waited for the arrival of creatures too stubborn to accept defeat. They would not have to wait long. The humans were coming, and they were bringing hope.